Good afternoon. It's great to be back in the Ad Club again. This reminds me kind of college where no one wants to sit in the front row. So for those of you in the back, there is room here. It's been a little over 2 years since I last spoke at the Ad Club, and when Kathy Kiley asked me to be part of this event, I got to thinking about how much has changed in the advertising and marketing and branding world over the past 2+ years, but I also thought how much has remained the same in terms of principles about building brands, driving sales, and connecting with our consumers. And so what I wanted to talk about today is some of the learning we've had over the past few years about how do you connect. Dunkin' Donuts is an iconic brand. It was founded in Quincy, Mass. Over 60 years ago, and it's one of those great iconic brands. Baskin-Robbins was another great brand, also over 60 years old, but they were born in very different times. It was the dawn of the fast food era, which is now called quick service restaurants. In fact, the founders of Dunkin' Donuts were one of the inventors of franchising, along with Howard Johnson. And you can kind of see one thrives today, one is down to one facility. And a lot of that then raises the question of, with brands that were born in a very different time, is a little bit what I'd like to talk about today, which is how do you keep a 60-year-old icon relevant today? You often see, traditional brands that have kind of lost their mojo, or cool startups that are really on the cusp of the leading edge but don't have history. Second, what's the right blend of new and traditional media? It's very easy to get caught up in the excitement of all of the new media, and we're no different in Dunkin', and I'll share that with you. But Dunkin's an interesting brand in that traditional media is working just as well for us as new media. So unlike some companies that have kind of out with the old and in with the new, a lot of our challenge at Dunkin' is how do you find that right balance? And finally, how do you reach today's changing consumer? Whether you're B2C or B2B, or whether you're consumer in the consumer market or technology or retail, much of what's driven brand building in the last 40 years has been the profound effect on the baby boomers and their families. And yet, as they move into their retirement years, out of the workforce and moving out of their prime spending years, things are changing. And so while much of the tools that we use today, some of the principles that we use to build brands haven't changed. And what I want to do today, and the time we have, is share a few of those principles that we're finding are really relevant in kind of navigating this complex world today. The first is adapt. Some people call it agility, but the question I would ask is, the consumer is changing, and are you? You look at brands like eBay and Apple, they're very different today than they were when they were founded. eBay was founded as a place to have auctions. In many ways it was the digital flea market, and today it's driven by fixed price sales and PayPal as their growth engine. Apple started out as a niche personal computer company, evolved into a computer for creatives, and today its business is driven by the iPhone. Macy's was the first national retailer, and then discovered that, guess what, all retail is local. And in many ways, Domino did the bravest thing, which is admit to its customer, guess what, our product isn't very good, and we need to change it. How many of you would have the courage to get on TV and have your CEO and say, our product is terrible and we're going to change it? But guess what? They're now leading their segment. And in our case, while we were built on baby boomers and families, it really boiled down to the question of who is Dunkin' for? And people often talk about demographics. Is Dunkin' upscale or downscale? And what's interesting is Dunkin' is defined by its brand personality as much as anything else. It's for, real people who like to have real things to do. If I had to pick one word, it would be authentic, down to earth, not driven by status. But, what does status mean today? What does down to earth mean today? And we're seeing profound changes. Here's a few. The millennials are moving into the buying power. That is a larger group than the baby boomers, larger in numbers, larger in spending patterns, and more different from their parents than the baby boomers were from theirs. We've talked about multicultural marketing. When I started my career at P&G, it was very much target marketing, and that's really evolved into marketing in a multicultural world. Hispanic and Latin customers are going to represent over half of the growth in the United States, and the whole world is becoming more multicultural. Value has a very different meaning than it did 10 years ago. So a lot of it is, are we really adapting? And in our case, it really boiled down to saying, what is Dunkin' for? And even though our name is Dunkin' Donuts, what we realized over 10 years ago is it's all about coffee and more. It's all about coffee and the other things. And while donuts bring real excitement, it was an understanding that our business is different and what Dunkin' stands for is very different. And how do we build around the world in over 50 countries that coffee ritual? So having figured out that the who is changing and the what is changing, we stepped back and kind of did what is often the toughest thing, which I call differentiate or die, which as long as I've been in my career has been one of the most important principles. All of us in this room think about our brands and our companies more than any consumer. Like themselves, they're thinking, about themselves, and it really is the answer to the question, why should consumers choose our brand or your brand over all their other choices? How do you boil that down to a simple thought? If it's one word, it becomes trite. If you go on and on, you lose them. Earlier in my career, when I was running a marketing department, one of the brand managers came and they had done a brand manifesto with the agency. And it was a beautiful piece of work that took 1 minute and 42 seconds to read and was quite inspirational. I said, this is fabulous, but the brand only runs 15-second ads. How are we going to compress this 1 minute and 43-second manifesto? So a lot of it is really boiling it down to, how do you answer that question? If you ran into an old friend and they say, what does your brand stand for? Working very closely with Hill Holliday, what our essence was Dunkin' is how everyday people who keep America running keep themselves running every day. To some degree, America runs on Dunkin' is more than just a tagline or a slogan. It's our brand purpose before brand purpose became a buzzword. And it really guides everything that we do. And it's been a really long-term idea. And as we developed that through a lot of great campaigns, we rediscovered, like so many people rediscover, some of the truths. And what we realize is what our fans and our rabid fans think about Dunkin' and say about Dunkin' is far more important than anything we could say. And that led to a great campaign called What Are You Drinkin'? That, here in the Boston area, you've probably seen on TV a lot. And we found simply asking that question and letting consumers put it back into their own language was far more powerful than anything we could say. But in a world of social media and a world of fragmentation, the real question is, how do you evolve that to be relevant today? And through some great work by Hill Holliday, realized the only thing better than asking the question is taking a look and celebrating the answer and really evolving that. So What Are You Drinkin' really started the conversation, and a campaign that we call #MyDunkin' provides the answer. I learned many years ago that oftentimes the most effective advertising is a testimonial, and people go through a lot of effort trying to recreate that. Well, what our brand advertising team in Hill Holliday did is comb through literally thousands of tweets on social media and found out what our fans were saying about Dunkin' every day. And what we discovered was that what our fans say about Dunkin' is far more important than anything we could say and far more relevant. And capturing the reality of those fans really unleashed the power and the depth of that, not just here in Boston where Dunkin' has been a part of the fabric for decades, but in new markets like Denver and Dallas and in California and around the world, from Shanghai to Thailand to Moscow, the real power of putting it in real people's worlds. And so what I want to do is show you 3 of the first 7 or 8 ads that Hill Holliday did that took the real worlds of real people and let them express their love of Dunkin' in that. So I'm going to...
Doom, 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 doom. Every a cappella rehearsal needs Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee to get me through. Hashtag my Dunkin'.
Nothing gives you a boost like delicious Dunkin' iced coffee. Share your story. Hashtag my Dunkin'.
Just found a Dunkin' Donuts pumpkin-flavored K-Cup pack in my coffee stash. Best day ever. Hashtag my Dunkin'.
Get 2 boxes of Dunkin' K-Cup packs for just $19.99. Share your story. Hashtag my Dunkin'.
Hoy por primera vez en muchísimo tiempo vamos a surfear descansados. Es hora de un café de Dunkin' a las 6. Hashtag mi Dunkin'.
Café de Dunkin', el rico y suave sabor que te encanta. Comparte tu historia. Hashtag mi Dunkin'.
The last person you saw, Mauricio, is a truly brave person. He's a surfer who lives in New York City. So you can imagine when you're getting up in New York and need to get running. And that ad actually it runs in both Spanish and English language versions that we run on both Spanish media and on English media. So if you see any of your Hill Holliday or Dunkin' friends and they look a little bloodshot, it's from poring over literally thousands of tweets and picking those. So you can also imagine what it's like if you've been just tweeting about some of your favorite brands and you get a phone call and say, how'd you like to be in a Dunkin' ad? So keep tweeting. Maybe you too can be famous. But the power of that ad, and it's fascinating the kind of depth of communication that you get from that. So the questions we all ask of, is it relevant? Is it differentiating? Does it align with our personality? And is it authentic? I talked about the brand personality, and our big learning has been that the authenticity of what our brand fans say is far more powerful than anything that we could say. You know, I've often asked, Dunkin' has a huge advertising budget. Can you differentiate without a big ad budget? Because some of you have big budgets, some small. And the answer is, if you've got a powerful idea, yes, you can. You know, Zara started out very small. Five Guys has built it on a unique proposition. Warby Parker is a new eyewear company. One of my favorite is Angry Birds, which has built a global phenomenon with no advertising. So the answer is, if you have a powerful idea, you can. A number of years ago, I heard someone speak on branding. And let me do a question here. How many of you have ever bought lettuce in a bag at one of the supermarkets? Raise your hand. How many of you ever seen lettuce in a bag TV ad? So his charge to all of us is, if they can brand lettuce, what's our excuse? And the answer is, and I buy branded lettuce too, and then I look at the price. Well, you know, it's a great idea if you're on the run and don't have a lot of time and don't want to put it together. So the answer is, if you have a truly differentiating idea, yes, you can build a brand without a big ad budget, if it's differentiating and if you get the message in front of the right people. You know, in our part, what's really been driving a lot of our success has been product innovation. It's interesting. Breakfast is the most ritualistic of meals. We want the same thing for breakfast, except when we don't. You know, it's often, where do you want to go for lunch? Where do you want to go for dinner? But we get into rhythms of stopping. And so what we found is providing a range of innovative products has been a key driver. And so a lot of it is, as you think about the brand, is saying, what are the things that differentiate you? In our case, it's been exciting new products like the turkey breakfast, the turkey sausage breakfast sandwich, or the infamous glazed donut breakfast sandwich, which you may have seen last year. We've got a world-class R&D department that works against very specific priorities, but 10% of the time they can do whatever they want. So they came up with the glazed donut breakfast sandwich. It's a glazed donut with an egg and cheese that's warmed up, and it tastes, as you might imagine, fabulous. And it's part of the new trend. Now, they said, what? And I said, well, you can sneak this into operational tests, and then if I get caught, I'll tell them I told you not to do it. So we snuck it into a little operations test, and the Twitter sphere exploded. Good Morning America, the Today Show, and everybody called it. We said, well, wait a minute, it's just an operations test. So This year we rolled it out nationally on National Donut Day. It was a big success, and one of the things that's really fun about that is it only has 370 calories, which is actually less than an oat bran muffin, for all of you who are having an oat bran muffin for breakfast. So we thought about introducing it as DD's Smart Item, but we thought even that was a little too dramatic. So it's not on the menu, but if you ask for it, they'll make one for you. And it's a little sticky, but it's fabulous. But a lot of it is, figuring out, in our case, it's, liking the same thing, but a little bit of change. In our case, too, as a retailer, the right guest experience and the right store environment is important. In the morning, it's a place where you can get fast, friendly, and helpful service. Get in and out very, very quickly. In the afternoon, maybe take a little bit of a pause. It's not very sexy, but it's very critical to building a retail brand. And it isn't the big, beautiful ad or the exciting new product, but a great guest experience in the morning and a great store environment is a key component of our success. The third is engage your consumers wherever they are. The world is changing. It's no surprise. More devices equals more distractions. How many of you, we know friends, you're watching TV, have your laptop or your Mac open, and you're also checking your iPhone, or for the nostalgia fans, checking your non-iPhone phone. And the other part of it is we're all proud of how we can multitask. Well, a study came out about a month ago, and it said, guess what? We can't multitask. That we're just kidding ourselves. That while we've got 3 devices open and we're very proud, what this scientific research showed is we're really only paying attention to one of those. Well, what does that do if you have a multimedia, multi-platform approach? Well, what it says is, in our case, we need to start engage consumers across all of the multiple touch points. And I kind of touched on it earlier. While some people are saying out with the old and in with the new, we have found that blending those two works far more effective. And so a key is, in a world where people are looking at multiple screens, are very distracted, putting those two together. One of my favorite examples here, we have a Dunkin Brands Facebook Fan of the Week. You can go on and like us, and if you get picked the Fan of the Week, we put your face up on Times Square in New York City. We'll tell you when it's going to be there, so you can go to New York City, and if you can't make it to New York City, we'll take a picture. Now, so those of you that want to be famous on Broadway, this is not quite that, but you've got a chance to actually have your image up there on Times Square. Now, the competition is tough. You may not be able to see this in the back there, but the young woman there on your right has a Dunkin cup tattooed on her forearm. That got her to be Facebook Fan of the Week. So tattoos do differentiate you. So maybe hard to explain as you go through life, but it is a way. But what we're finding is, how do you put together that synergy? We get a lot of coverage of our Times Square billboard, but one of the things we've learned is it had really great power at Times Square, but sometimes it was so bright it didn't show up on TV. So again, working with the creatives at Hill Holiday, designed an image that not only looks great on Times Square, but when you're looking over Ryan Seacrest's shoulder on New Year's Rockin' Eve, you can see it as well, kind of blending the new and the old. An important part of that is, in our case, executing a mobile-first strategy. There's no doubt that mobile is transforming everything we're doing. As a brand that's on the run, it's affecting us even more than other folks. But what we found early on is it's very easy to get caught up in the hype of mobile. And to some degree, we're implementing a common sense approach to mobile that we kind of call no pain, no gain, which basically says, while the technology is exciting and you want to empower your efforts with technology, don't forget the consumer and figure out what's really important. So in our case, for example, we're a brand on the run, so people are looking for Dunkins. If you've got your normal Dunkin, you know where it is, so obviously GPS is built in. Well, we did a partnership with Waze, which is social media meets GPS, and it does things like tell you if there's a traffic jam, tell you if there's a detour. Well, also, if you ask them where you can get a cup of coffee, guess what the answer is? Dunkin' Donuts. I talked about moving to a multicultural society. So we were the first QSR to convert our app to dual language in both English and Spanish. So we give you a choice. Running on Dunkin' is our brand purpose, and so we've tied up with Running On Friends and have found that there's a real power of putting old and new. I've got a picture of Gronkowski up there, and this is kind of an interesting part of learning. We have a very sophisticated digital team that's a combination of people at Dunkin' and our agency partners, and are doing a lot of state-of-the-art digital mobile download work. But also, in addition to that, we've got some very, very strong local marketing, and an important part of that is local sports marketing. You see it here with our ties with Gronkowski and the Patriots or the Red Sox. We do it in other cities, and so a lot of our sports marketing is tied to the local level. And we combined a very simple promotion that we titled They Win, You Win, which is if your team in that market won and you downloaded the mobile app, you got a free cup of Dunkin' coffee. Kind of blending old school local sports marketing with digital. And guess what? That blend of old and new drove more mobile downloads than any digital effort we did. And we found that while synergy is kind of an overworked word, that this blending of old and new, and so as you navigate your brands, whether you're on the agency side or on the company side, I would be careful about dismissing traditional media, but also be careful about dismissing the blend of old and new and the power of PR. So on digital downloads, and again, we're doing a lot of sophisticated digital programs, and say, well, what are your two most successful digital downloads? The local sports marketing was number 3, and the two were, I know, two of the most important holidays on all of your calendars, which are National Coffee Day and National Donut Day. So there again, you may not say, we certainly celebrate them, but our fans do. But here again, just tying really what's a fun holiday where we have a chance to just celebrate, that drove record mobile downloads. So, a big part of our learning is blending new and old, and also learning that really, and you heard a little bit about this in some of the earlier presentations, that social media and social marketing really isn't advertising, it's really a dialogue. It's a chance to have a dialogue with your fans. And I think when you push out too much advertising, you run the risk of turning people off. And if you find a way to engage in the dialogue, in the case of #MyDunkin, a real dialogue with our fans of what they love about Dunkin'. And so that's really driven a lot of our strategies. The 5th point is be agile, and I talked about this earlier, and that is innovate and don't be afraid to take risks. Mobile is really driving our strategy. We've got a completely revamped loyalty program called DD Perks, which is in test market right now, that gives our chance to really engage with our fans. We're building a CRM platform. And so realizing that the world is changing and how we engage with our guests is changing. Part of that is social media meets TV advertising. We have a traditional partnership with ESPN on Monday Night Football, which is, as we've increased our national footprint, did a multi-year partnership where we sponsor the pregame show of Monday Night Football, and it's a great way to reinforce our brand here in New England, but also build our brand around the country. And when you buy, those of you in the, realize when you buy a big TV sponsorship, you get a billboard, and billboard is Monday Night Football brought to you by Dunkin' Donuts. Now, I realize, how exciting are, our billboards, and so they're 6 seconds and they're up there. And so here again, some of the real creative folks at Hill Holiday working with our team said, maybe we can do something a little bit different. And rather than have just a static billboard, why don't we tie in with Vine, which is very hot. And what they do is literally the Hill Holiday and Dunkin' brand and advertising team and digital team huddle, no pun intended, in the halftime of a Monday Night Football game. and reenact the most interesting or controversial play of the day and air that on Vine in the third or first quarter. And what it did is, rather than having a standard billboard that said Monday Night Football brought to you by Dunkin' Donuts, you end up with that was 6 seconds. I know you were paying attention, but we'll run that again and see. I know you're searching for the profound strategic message in that. But the reality is, it's funny, Dunkin' has this great fan loyalty, but also it's a very irreverent, fun brand. Well, what this did, again, it exploded engagement. And what we thought is, we've got great advertising running during the show, and we're running those ads digitally and on TV. Let's just take advantage of the static billboard and do something fun and engaging. And so the teams are huddling behind the scenes on a stop action. Another example is we did a partnership with Top Chef, where in the competition there's a secret ingredient, and they reveal the secret ingredient at the last minute, and then the chefs have to prepare an entire meal with the secret ingredient. And this season that's running right now, the secret ingredient was coffee. And so again, to build, and of course we couldn't reveal it in advance because then it wouldn't be a secret, right? So, but what we did is, working in this case, with Google, under Google Hangout, and this is Stan Frankenthaler, who's our head of R&D. Stan also, he's a James Beard award-winning chef, owned and ran Salamander here in Boston for a number of years. And so we did a Google Hangout where, in fact, they let people interact, and they created products on the Google Hangout of letting people suggest what might be some of their fun things using coffee. Again, leveraging a very strong, strategically right sponsorship with, in this case, leveraging the power of Google Hangout, which you saw on the left. And what we're finding, again, is this blend of new and old is very, very positive. The fifth, and after differentiation, I think one of the most important, and that is, great teams equal great results. We saw that here in Boston, where, in 2012, the Red Sox were in the basement of Major League Baseball, and last year, with just a few changes in personnel, but a very big change in leadership and attitude, went on to win the World Series. And it's something, it's interesting, as you go through a career, you get to a point where, in the early part of your career, so much of what you accomplish is due to your own personal productivity. But as you evolve in today's complex world, a lot of it, I think, is, are you surrounding yourself with people better than yourself? And that can sometimes be a little intimidating. But are you building a team, whether you have people reporting to you or not, but are you building a team of people better than yourself? And so as I kind of step back, in terms of staying on the leading edge, what struck me over the past couple of years is that the tools that we use to engage consumers are very, very different than they were 6 months ago, a year ago, or 2 years ago. And even literally monthly, something new emerges on the scene. But what I've found is, while the techniques are changing, a lot of the fundamental principles haven't, which is, number one, adapt. The consumer's changing. Are you changing? Are we recognizing that we're in a multicultural world with very different attitudes and demographics than we had before? The second is differentiate or die. Can you answer in 1 or 2 sentences why consumers can choose your brand? Can you avoid what I call the curse of incrementalism, which is, okay, it's planning time. Let's make the 2014 marketing plan 10% better than last year, as opposed to saying, wait a minute, am I really giving people reasons why to choose my brand? Engage consumers. We're in a multi-screen world. TV is not dead. TV viewing is actually up. But consumers have more choice. And in a world where there are multiple screens, and where we've all recognized that, guess what, we can't multitask, are all of us figuring out what's the best way to engage consumers in changing our plans? Be agile. as I thought back on, my thoughts today versus 2 years ago, some of the principles are the same, but some of the techniques are very different. And I suspect 2 years from now, if Kathy and the team decide to do Edge again, things will be very different again. So recognizing that the world is changing, innovate and don't be afraid to take risks. When we did the Vine, we knew it might not work. When we did the glazed donut breakfast sandwich, and thought about putting together egg and cheese on a glazed donut, it seems like a good idea to some people, but not everybody. And lastly, are you building a team? Are you surrounding yourself, not just at work, but in the network you build among friends and coworkers to help you navigate that? So as we wrap up, I'll kind of end with one of my favorite quotes, and that is, if you're doing business today like you were last week, chances are competition is gaining on you. If you're doing business like today like you did last month, chances are competition is beating you. And if you're doing business today like you did last year, you may well be out of business and don't know it yet. So thanks again for letting me be part of your conference. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.